Dr. Binod Mishra. He is working with the IIT-Roorkee as Associate Professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. He joined IIT-Roorkee in 2007. Prior to it, he has worked with BITS Pilani. Dr. Binod Mishra is elected Vice President of Association for English Studies of India for the period of 2018-20. He has been editor-in-chief for Indian Journal of English Studies for a time period of 2012 to 2017. Besides guiding various research projects, he has authored 21 books. He has contributed 36 chapters in books, and he has published 73 papers in noted journals, international and national journals. Today, he is with us, and the title that he will be taking up is "To Be or Not to Be: Combating Communication Challenges in Teaching During COVID-19 Era." Sir, you are good to go. Anytime you like, you can start, sir.
I'm really delighted to see the number of participants increasing like anything. First of all, let me express my delight to be invited as a resource person in this webinar. My utmost regards to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Rai, the organizing committee members of this webinar, participants from different corners of the country. The title of this webinar, which is actually a portmanteau word, is not only timely, but it is also tempting. Tempting in the sense, because presently we are in a situation where the role of teachers has actually become very important. Since majority of us, majority of the participants happen to be teachers or would be teachers, I need to be forgiven if they feel like imposing my views upon them, because I too belong as one of the members of that academic fraternity, my dear friends. All of us in the present day world must realize that as a community, we are facing this calamity, which is called COVID-19. And hence, the role of teachers today has become more important. I'm actually reminded of one of the lines of the veteran romantic poet, John Keats, who in one of his poems says, this is the world where to be, this is the world where to think is to be full of sorrow, where palsy shakes a few, sad, grey, leaden eye despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. My dear friends, the sort of pandemic we are in has actually made our task more difficult than ever. It doesn't mean that we as teachers are trying to shirk our responsibilities, but then our role has become quite difficult now. Not only difficult, but rather challenging. Challenging in the sense that many of us who actually happen to work in interior areas where they do not have these infrastructural facilities, they might be facing problems of any sort. So my dear friends, what I intend to do through this presentation or through this talk is actually to quell the fears, because many of us have got several apprehensions, several fears as to what will happen. But then there is nothing to fear. It is actually a question of mind. There is nothing good or bad. It is actually the way we think. So through my talk, I would like to quell the fears that might be haunting many of our new friends who are still unfamiliar with these online teaching, work from home, and the teacher's role that they really feel. And of course, when I start my presentation, I was actually reminded of some of the beautiful lines, and through that I'll start, because I have named my presentation or titled my presentation as "To be or not to be, that is the question, whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings of outrageous fortune." So my dear friends, having said this, let me share my screen so that what I say and what I do, the way I perform, there actually ought to be a sort of compatibility, because we are bound to face these challenges in the days to come. Our roles have actually been in a stage of transformation. Now, there's a question of survival, not only for ourselves, but for those many of our pupils who are actually separated and segregated from us in any far remote corners of a country like India. And we as teachers actually want to reach them. We as teachers want to share our views with them. We as teachers want to explain. We as teachers want to convince. We as teachers want to counsel that we are there for you, my dear friends. So when we do that, it is actually time that we told them that there are times when such situations arise, but such times will also fade into insignificance in the days to come, and we will actually become familiar with all that we are doing, we are practicing, we are actually endeavoring to do. Now, as I said, my dear friends, yes, let me get it connected. Fine. Files. Yes. So the title of my presentation hence is "To be or not to be." That is actually the question, as I said in the beginning. So my dear friends, let's have some of the words of this quote from Hamlet. Of course, I belong to the world of literature, and I do understand that many of our participants who are attending or listening to this poor talk by me, some of them might be from literature, whereas others also might be from different disciplines. So we are rather discussing to be or not to be. That's the question that many of us are facing today. And then the other line that Hamlet says, whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Of course, presently, not for us, but for the entire world, we are actually facing the arrows of outrageous fortune. And during such situations, we actually feel like whether we should take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them. And then there are several alternatives that also come to our mind. But then to Hamlet, this alternative that comes to his mind is, should he die? And then again he thinks, to die, to sleep no more, and by his sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is there to, it's a consummation devoutly to be this. But then what if one dies? What if one sleeps? Even if one sleeps, in dreams also, they may be haunted. So my dear friends, we are all in such a situation, but there is nothing to panic. There is actually nothing to panic, because let us remember what one of the former presidents of India, Dr. Kalam, in one of his books entitled A Vision for the New Millennium said. And all of you remember that he was the person who had talked about 2020 vision. We are in 2020 now. So when we are in 2020, we should actually rethink whether we have been able to transfer or translate the dreams that were once conceived by none other than Kalam. In the book entitled A Vision for the New Millennium, what he says in the preface will actually satisfy and satiate you more, my dear friend. Ignited young minds, we feel, are a powerful resource. This resource is mightier than any resource on earth. As teachers, all of us have got plenty of resources at our disposal. The need simply is to select the resource. The need simply is to decide what way to go and to realize our dreams, that we are no more in the stage of developing India, but we are actually very near the completion of our developed India. How is that possible, my dear friends? That is possible only when we analyze our core competences. What are our core competences? In the same book, while writing this book, Dr. Kalam had said, India's core competency, one of the core competencies of India is human capital. And my dear friends, when we talk about human resource, this country, as you might be seeing nowadays, the way people are moving from one place to another, what are all these? All these are human resources. And you are a repository of all these human resources. When you have all these human resources, why can't you utilize? It is only the medium that will change. The person will remain the same. The teacher will remain the same. It is only that he will put himself into a different mode, a mode that matters now. But that does not mean this is going to continue for a long time. But at least it is going to enrich us in more ways than none, in more ways than one, my dear friend. That is why I say, let us try to analyze our core competencies. Have you ever thought of your changing role nowadays? Are you only a teacher that once went to the school or the college, like the old village school master toddling or either cycling his way to the school or the institution? We are living in an age where we are having lots of facilities at our every beck and call, my dear friends. So our role is changing. We are no more the teacher who with his rotten yellowed notes will go to the class. We are actually the performers. We're actually the people who are instrumental in bringing that change. We are actually the leaders. We are actually the counselors. We are actually the advisors. We are actually the people who will show them the paths to our students, whether they are near or whether they are far. So let me quote here one of the lines of famous American novelist John Gardner, who says, teaching and leading are distinguishable occupations. Teaching and leading are distinguishable occupations. But every great leader is clearly teaching, and every great teacher is leading. The concept of having a webinar like this also might have grown in the mind of teachers, the teachers who are going to lead the upcoming generation to a new India, an India of tomorrow that never dies. Isn't it, my dear friend? So as a teacher, we are not only the teacher, because the title, the theme of the conference or the webinar is teacher as a mentor, teacher as a leader. And you are doing that. Might be in previous talks and in the talks to come. Many of our venerated if you are a teacher, think you are not only a teacher, you are a leader, you are leading your students. But how to lead? How to control? And you know, the control button is with the teacher. We are not, no, many of my friends often say, is this the substitute? Is this the substitute to all the teaching that we did? Of course, Nothing can be the concrete substitute to anything, my dear friend. But then if this is not only the substitute, it is actually a subordinate. So technology is a subordinate. And when we talk about technology, what we need to know is you are behind the technology. You have got the button, you have got the remote, my dear friends. So earlier, what you did as a teacher, you earlier used to follow these methods when you used to teach, you used to lecture, you used to organize group discussions, you used to have presentation seminars, no? And many other things that we have listed here. And you are also going to line when you are going to work from your home. What is actually needed is the way you communicate. What actually our students need today is communicating with them. They should not feel themselves that they are at the remote corner. They should feel that the teacher is there with them. They should feel the teacher is there with them to show them the paths, my dear friend. And if this situation has come, let us actually try to be optimistic by remembering one of the lines, sweet are the uses of adversity, my dear friend. What is not there today at your beck and call? What is not there was actually a challenge. But why can't we think that this is not only a challenge, this is an opportunity? Many of our like-minded friends who feel that this is actually a burden, this is actually a sort of imposition, they should also feel that they are actually going to convert it into opportunities. Why? Because when you are at your home, you have plenty of time to think. You have plenty of time to endeavor, to create, to provide something new, to think of a new medium, to think of how you can get yourself connected to. Actually the same way, and it is more interesting because at times, even though you may have a feeling that many of our students, they actually try to humbug you in a different way. Why can't you delivering like anything in the past, and you will deliver now also? The only thing is that there's a screen before you and you are blabbering like anything. But then the way you communicate, that really matters. Let us also think of some of the beautiful things that this adversity has given us. When we walk on the roads today in the campus, we see what a beautiful sky we have, what a beautiful earth which has become more greener than ever. What actually the time that we get together with our family people, with our inmates, with many of our kinsmen, online devices. We are more connected than ever, my dear friend. And then let's try to think that a new culture is emerging, a new culture is evolving. The culture of working from home is becoming a reality. And this technology, had I not been here familiar with the technology, I could not have reached all of you people waiting to hear from me, and myself also when there are conferences in the physical form. I think there are very few people listening to us, but here we can see many people listening to us. They are apt to listen. They are actually very attentive, and they are listening everything, my dear friends. And of course, as teachers, if you feel that you cannot carry your notes to the classroom, still you have this speaking. You have been speaking in a very fashioned manner, which we often say extempore, where things are at your disposal. There are other resources also. Government has provided a lot of facilities, NPTEL, then Swayam, then Google Classes, then through Zoom, through which we are zooming in, and then you are enjoying also, and through WebEx, which we are also using, my dear friend. So let us try to understand that technology is a binding force. And then when we go for having our classes, because many people often say that nowadays there are many things, how can we concentrate upon one thing? Of course, there are challenges. Proliferation of resources. You have many resources. No? A novice person will often think what resource to select, what to reject. So this proliferation of resources actually confuses us at times, and we often feel that we are confused about the goals of our teaching. So first we have to decide, why are we teaching? What for are we teaching? To whom are we teaching? Are we being listened to? Is there a proper collaboration, cooperation between myself and listening to me? Because most of the time in earlier days, we simply thought that we went to the class, we did the class, and the class was over, isn't it? Of course, at times you also gave them homeworks, home tasks, assignments. You can also give homework, home tasks, and assignment like this. But then in such a sort of teaching, what happens at times, which actually appears as a sort of hurdle, is the lack of communication. Proper connectivity, of course, that at times is a reality also, because when I take my classes online, I feel many of my students who are in some corner of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, they are not able to get properly connected. But then that does not in any way disinterest me, because I can understand there's certain things that we have to realize. Now, when we talk about communication, how we can succeed appropriately and how we can make a sort of meaning is making some amount of imagination, making some amount of anticipation. And this imagination and anticipation can go hand in hand only when we think of the reality of the two. For example, I, from my own room, from my own study room, I am delivering this talk. I have this facility. So this is my situation as a sender. But I also have to think of what I'm trying to give to the other party, and this other party is my receiver. So naturally, at times there may be difficulties. That is why you have the facility that at times you can send them your slides, you can send them your notes, and you can also give them some time where you can discuss. So it is quite pertinent here to know the communication model, or the space, or the impediments, or the problems that occur in and between, because for a successful communication, as we believe that there has to be a proper medium, and a proper medium through which our receivers can respond to us. Now, the difficulties that many of you might be feeling, isn't it? Many of you might be feeling. If you might have ever tried, because I believe that many of you are settled in towns and cities where everything is at your disposal and you have the facility of connectivity and all. But still, when you are going to plan your lecture, think of your lecture, and when you have a lecture, you might be having these experiences. For example, you have to speak more than is required. When you are having a face-to-face communication in the classroom, naturally there are other diversions, distractions, and there are other things also. I mean, the exchange of non-verbals and all. But here, you might be feeling that you have to speak more, isn't it? And many of our new friends, they might be having a sort of insecurity also, because as I can see here, that this lecture is being recorded. So when you feel that you are being recorded, you are being watched, you have a fear. And I always say, my dear friends, don't have any fear. As they were earlier, this is quite natural. No. And if it is being recorded, and if it is being uploaded, there is also a scope of editing. I have had 2 very important courses on MOOC, and I could find the pleasure prior to getting recorded here. I had this recorded sessions at BITS Pilani also. So I had an experience. But then for those people who believe that they are going to start afresh, they might be having some amount of difficulty, but this difficulty will soon fade away if you get exposed to 1 or 2 sessions. Now, There are other fears also, there are other difficulties also. You feel that you are not receiving proper feedback. So the feedback is quite improper. The students, in more ways than one, they actually know all the tricks, but can he or can she be a greater trickster than a teacher? You know, as a teacher, we know who is doing what. So from here also we can anticipate. If you are delivering a talk to one of your familiar classes, you might be knowing who are the people who might not be listening attentively. So please get ready for that. Attendance may be poor, but then in course of time, this attendance will increase. What actually happens is we only think from our point of view. We do not think from the point of view of the receiver. The receiver also may have lots of problems. The receiver may simply think that the teacher is only one way. Of course, in this device, through this mode, it may appear to be one way, but then in course of time, because when you conduct an assignment session, when you conduct a discussion forum, then perhaps it will become two-way. Moreover, from the teacher's point of view, they think that the teacher is blabbering, but then from our point of view, we must think that we must empathize, my dear friend. We must rather put ourselves into their positions. And that is possible when we think from their point of view. What will happen? We'll actually try to have a sort of control, not to deliver as fast as I'm doing here, because I know all of my listeners, majority of them are teachers and they can well receive me. But when I am to speak to my students, naturally my pace will be slow, my pronunciation will also be very candid, my examples and illustrations will also be very attractive and relevant to the day-to-day activities, because you know, students are in the same way disturbed than us. They are more disturbed because we have got more experience. So there is a sort of psychological fear. And of course, we do not have the facility of non-verbals here, but there are some other non-verbals that can be utilized in order to make our lessons learned well. Now, what are the remedies? These were the challenges that I talked. What are the remedies? For this sort of lecture, I mean, when you're going to give a virtual lecture, online lecture, you need to prepare more than is required. So what do you intend to do? You actually have to plan properly. While you are planning properly, you do not have a control over yourself. I mean, what are you going to teach? What is the content? Isn't it? What is the content? How much time will it take? What are the examples that you should give so that they may understand? And when should I stop? Because ultimately, as I said earlier, the control is with you, my dear friend. Apart from this, you may also think of, because these science people, engineering people have got a lot of innovative techniques and creativity. So depending upon, varying upon your subjects, you can think of the creativity that you can bring into your teaching. And of course, as I said, you have to be empathetic, thinking that they are listening to you from a distance. Hence, there may be at times aberrations, there may be at times disturbances. Moreover, you must bring genuine sincerity and animation in your voice. You know, everyone, all of us have got a unique voice, my dear friend. When I talk about voice, what I actually mean is the way you should speak should be audible to them. And for that, no, there are many people who feel that their voices are low. They can always reduce the speed. They can always reduce the word per hour, word per second. No? And moreover, they should bring a sort of zeal, a sort of enthusiasm and animation. It should appear that you are willingly delivering this talk. And then perhaps you will be able to captivate their minds, and they will also be able to listen to you. And moreover, time management is very important, my dear friend. How much time you should devote, and that is also important when you are preparing, because when you are preparing, you decide if it is a 30-minute or a 60-minute talk, how much time to be given to introduction, how much time to be given to discussion, how much time to be given to explanation, how much time should you reserve for your interactive session when they can ask questions and you can answer them. Remember, my dear friends, as teachers, you have got a great benediction at that, and that benediction is you are all great communicators. You're all great communicators. All teachers of the world are teachers because they are great communicators. When I say communicators, I have a different meaning. I do not only mean simply by communication meaning speaking, not at all. By communication also means what amount of content to be delivered, what amount of content to be earmarked for assignment. And to communicate, no, there often arises a question which many of our friends also ask: why do they not listen to us? Because you do not want yourself to be listened to, my dear friend. That is my answer. Because as teachers, we sometimes take things for granted. We do not prepare. When you do not prepare, you do not bring enthusiasm, and you do not have a sort of soft corner for your students. You simply feel that they are here. I mean, my dear friends, let us try to have some amount of cordiality for our students, some amount of cooperation for the students, because at times they may ask you some questions. The questions at times may appear to be very silly. It may be silly from your point of view, but it is not silly from their point of view. So what you should do is, you should, as I said earlier, you should anticipate the questions. Because at times when many of us also feel that if they ask a question that is threatening, what should I do? My dear friends, why is it threatening? It is threatening because you are not thorough. It is threatening because you have not anticipated that such a question may also be there. So if you believe in preparing for your class, I think nothing in the world can deprive you of becoming a successful communicator or a success. Nowadays, what is happening? Many people also have a feeling that teaching is becoming very monotonous, and online teachings become more monotonous. I may have this feeling also, but I at times feel that I do not want any monotony to be there, because as a teacher, I'm not only talking to them, I'm talking to myself also. That is why teaching is a dialogue. I am asking myself whether this approach of mine will work, and I have found in most of my MOOC courses, I have found very good feedbacks by students, because you have to make it interactive, and you can make it interactive even when you are delivering online. How can that be possible? For example, when a teacher is explaining, the teacher can also say, am I clear? Aren't I? This way you make them feel that you are very much interactive, and after your class is over, they may send you good feedbacks, my dear friend. So teaching has to be a dialogue, and it should not only become a monologue. This should actually mean that we must have patience towards questions, no matter how silly they are. Now, when I say planning, when you plan your teaching, when you plan your lecture, there are certain things that also must be kept in mind. Of course, if you're teaching a particular subject, you know your students. These students belong to the same fold. They might be having different experiences. They might be having different backgrounds. They may be having different readings. But when you are delivering a talk to a crowd of people, to a crowd of pupils rather, who have got different sorts of exposures and experiences and knowledge, that you must be aware before you plan your teaching. I mean, we call that audience awareness. Think of when I was invited to this talk, invited for this talk, I asked the organizers, who are the people listening to me? And when I came to know that they are teachers, I decided my job is safe, because teachers can understand the problems of teachers. But when I'm told that they are my students, naturally I will go an extra mile to bring such examples. Because, you know, my dear friends, as a teacher, here comes the question of your role. And the role is, and never think that you are doing it simply for the sake of doing it. There is a very beautiful line which says, which I often quote about the relationship that is maintained between the students. कुछ रिश्तों में मुनाफा नहीं होता, वो यूं ही हमें अमीर बना देते. My dear friends, the relationship between a student and a teacher is like that. At times you will realize when a student who was taught by you 5 or 6 years ago, when suddenly one day he drops in your room and says, "Can you recognize me? Can you remember me, sir?" I think I become wealthier than ever when I receive such a compliment. So when you are planning your teaching, please keep into consideration the relationship part. That is very important. And when you understand the relationship, then you also, in your mind's eye, you will divide your students into several categories. Those who are the brighter ones, those who are the bright ones, those who are little less radiant, because all these things are very important, my dear friends. So divide your text, divide your content, and then comes the use of language. Language use is one of the most fantastic things on earth. Many of our subject teachers, what they sometimes skip is that they actually use the same words that they might have taken from somewhere else or the other. For example, somebody teaching a science, chemistry, physics, biology, suppose they use a word like activate, then what will happen? Activate may be very familiar with some of them, but may be difficult for many of them. So here, as a teacher, one must control the use of language, and one must make a lesser word which is more familiar. It is not needed time and again to use the word like anal, use the word like verbose, use the word like viable, use the word like terminate. So when that you are going to use for the sake of others. I mean, here, let me make a point of difference between when one writes and when one speaks. You speak to convince, and you also write to convince, but then the difference of the terminologies will be there. When you are writing, one has got the facility of consulting a thesaurus and a dictionary, but when one is speaking, the listeners or the receivers do not carry dictionaries with them. That is why one has to be quite familiar with the word that one uses, and especially for those people who actually do not have the same sort of brightness as compared to others. And then comes delivery. What is actually that I mean by delivery? When I talk about delivery, what I mean is the way you speak. Imagine when you have prepared. Imagine that you are now going to deliver. What will be, how will you start? What will be the first line? Because it is only in the first line that you are going to captivate them. And then if you're beginning with an episode, no, you are actually to be clear of that, clear about that. Otherwise, the students really fall, or students really rise in the first sentence that the teacher speaks. Of course, when it is face to face, then maybe they can see and maybe they can ask instantly. But when you are doing it online, they cannot ask on the spot. That is why when you deliver in such a manner, the beginning may be a bit slow. And when you start going into the discussion part, you may be a bit fast. And then when you start in the depth of the discussion or in the depth of your teaching, naturally you at times ought to be more spontaneous, but remember that you are speaking for them, not for experts. So when you deliver, remember your pitch, remember your rate, You may remember your intonation, remember your speed, remember, because it is ultimately your voice that matters. Let me tell you, your voice matters. तुम्हारी आवाज ही तुम्हारी पहचान है. So it is your voice that brings you bricks or that brings you bouquets. So please work in the direction of your voice. Now, as I said, when you begin, in the first instance, you are going to capture them. And how can you capture? By telling them something unusual. Nobody wants to listen, no? Think of your own days when you were a student. Did you ever want to listen to your teacher? No. But if the teacher says, oh, my dear friends, today I'm going to tell you something that you will really feel exhilarated than ever. And you will find that all the students then start looking at you or waiting to listen to you. It is always better to speak directly, because all of us as teachers, we are persuaders. We have all of us have got a sort of persuasive quality, and persuading is an art. Because as a teacher nowadays, our job has become just like you are going to sell a product. How can you sell a product, my dear friends? You are going to sell your product only when you convince your customers that this is worth saleable. And if you are working or if you are talking over a very difficult subject, a drab subject, it is always better to bring some amount of incidents which can make them laugh. For that, you may at times have to dramatize. For example, those students to whom you are going to teach the art of public speaking, and all of them feel like nervous when they have to speak, you can tell them, खुशफहमियों में भी जीना एक कला है, कौन कहता है presentation वाला है. So by doing all these, what you're doing, you are not letting your listeners at their own will. Rather, you are bringing them towards you and they want to listen more and more. Make use of humor if possible, because ultimately you will require your humor, and humor has got a fantastic touch. No? Even if somebody is going to tell something very difficult, and in between he tells something of a very lighter mode, the difficulty of that content becomes easier, my dear friends. So what you can do, you can provide some amount of humor, you can provide some amount of joke, you can provide some amount of stories. Let it be told in a telltale manner so that your listeners never wants to leave you. Rather, they want to be with you, my dear. Fine. Now, when I say using humor, one caution is very important, that you must feel that they should laugh. Sometimes you create a joke that does not make them laugh, rather you only laugh. For example, here see, any novice person who is going to deliver his first presentation and is going to talk about language, let us spend some time on the sort of the selection of words that he or she has made. Effective communication skills or effective communication that kills. What is the problem? The problem, as I have said earlier, is the problem of difficult, alien, more verbose, wordy words which appear like a jungle, and the students are looking for the ways so that they can take the escape routes. So when as a would-be teacher, when you are going to prepare your first lecture, and you actually do it with a lot of dedication, you do it with a lot of enthusiasm. Sometimes too much of enthusiasm actually feels like anything, and you do not have a control over the selection of words. Remember one thing, when as a teacher, whether online or offline, mode of teaching, it is always that the teacher's personality matters more. What exactly do I mean by personality? And of course, in an online teaching, they cannot make so of all the traits of your personality, but as a teacher, these things are very important, and this will be very helpful to those who are going to become teachers in the days to come. Teachers actually communicate not only through speech, but also through their mannerisms and personality. And personality, even though it is only one word, it does not mean one has to be very handsome, but it actually means that you have to have decent manners, you have to be polite, you have to be clean, you actually have to have a clarity of voice, you have to be timely. When I had to deliver this talk, I was told that my talk will start at 12:30. I was sitting here since 12:15, because you never know when the gadgets will work and when the gadgets will fail. We are in a technical age. There is a revolution 2020, but still technology is a slave. Teachers are the masters, my dear friend. So what we need to do, we actually need to have some amount of some sort of traits which are actually expected. Everyone wants that his teachers should look clean, his teachers should have a very pleasant voice, his teachers should address them in a very cordial manner, and you must have a sort of inclusiveness. Not all of us can be Socrates, not all of us can be Plato, not all of us can be Aristotle, but at least we can be what we are. We can be a subject teacher so that my subject knowledge is appreciated and admired by people who are not here, but then distantly they are listening to me. That matters only when you keep into consideration some parts of personality, because your personality affects your personality values. And moreover, if I'm right, one must have a sort of interactive style. This interactive style works. If I simply continue in a textbook manner, in a bookish style, nobody will listen to me, my dear friends. But if I believe that on the other side there are people whom I cannot see, but they're listening to me, and if I time and again keep into consideration the use of connectives and use of linkers, then perhaps I will become more interactive than ever, and my students will take me for granted that, of course, the style is really worth imitating, and the style is one that makes us learn, that makes us understand. So one must have a sort of, all of us have some problem. And what is that problem, my dear friend? The problem is the lack of self-control. I also have felt I am given 30 minutes. At times I cross that barrier, because as a teacher, you start feeling that you have got an ocean of knowledge. No, my dear friends, you might be having knowledge, but then you might use the control button, which is very important. As rightly has been said in Katha Upanishad, he who is possessed of supreme knowledge by concentration of mind must have his senses under control, like a spirited steed. Mahabharata, when Arjuna gets very infuriated, he gets very aggressive. Then Krishna emerges and says, remember that you are not fighting this for yourself, you're actually fighting for dharma, you're actually fighting for the general good. So you must have a control. And when I say control, control is just like a horse. Nietzsche once said that intellect is a little more than the emotions servant. We at times become emotional, and we are unable to control our emotions. That is why what we once should do is, one's emotions should be controlled, because emotions are powerful, yet they are blind. Intellect is weak, but intellect can see. So bring some amount of rationality so that you can prove your point the way you want. Because ultimately, a teacher's sole aim is to teach, to convince, to let others know that he is there in the times of crisis. He is there to help them when the need so arises, my dear friends. As I said, there are certain things which are very important. When you are trying to persuade your students, please practice these 7 mantras of persuasion. What are those 7 mantras? The first is the belief. How can this belief come to you? You must believe that what you are going to tell them is more important. You are confident of what you are going to tell them. In this context, I often think of a story which was between which is actually an experience between a myna and an elephant. This myna and elephant were two friends, and one day always wished to fly over villages, over seas, glide over the seas, want to see the forest, want to see the houses. Is it possible? And the myna said, yes, it is possible. How? What the myna did? The myna put its beak at the back, plucked a feather and gave it to the elephant and told the elephant, grab it in your mouth firmly and then flap your ears and then you will fly. And you know, the elephant did the same and the elephant started flying. And when elephant started flying, it actually glided over the seas. It actually flew over the villages, houses. It was really a very enriching experience. And when it returned, it told the myna, the elephant told the myna, what a nice experience. You have actually made me fly, isn't it? Now the myna says, I did not make you fly. I actually only told you one way, and it was only your belief that you could also fly. So my dear friends, it is our belief that can enable us to fly. And not only the belief, even if the elephant could have the belief and could not have the enthusiasm, it could not have flew. So you must have the enthusiasm and the knowledge, as all of you are the storehouses of knowledge. So there is no need to worry. Of course, you will utilize empathy. You will be persistent. When I say persistence, what I actually mean is sometimes it so appears that they are not attending. Let me give up. No. If I give up tomorrow, none of them will come tomorrow. So let me continue. Let me persist in what I say. And one, of course, must have energy. The energy to deliver, as I have said in the beginning, it appears and you feel and you experience that when you are doing a virtual class, when you are taking an online class, it is more energetic. It requires more energy. And then you must be consistent. By consistence, what I mean is what you say it in such a manner that people are tempted to buy your ideas. My dear friends, these are some of the things which are actually required in order to become an effective online teacher, in order to become someone who actually arrests the attention, who actually grabs the admiration, who actually decides that they have come here to work. Dear friends, to teachers I always say, I always quote a line, सुना है बहुत पढ़ लिख लिए हो, आओ कुछ वैसी बात करें जो कभी हमने पढ़ी ही नहीं. So my dear friends, as all of you are teachers, and I do not intend to impose my ideas upon you, I simply actually want to share my ideas with you. And time and again, I will repeat that maintain a sort of positive attitude throughout. Because if you do not have the positivism, perhaps as a teacher, you cannot succeed. My dear friends, there are certain quotes which will actually motivate you. You are in all the situations, whether they are adverse or supportive, please think of what Descartes says, I exist because I think. No, to be or not to be, that is the question, no doubt. But then remember that some revelation is at hand, and that revelation is, I think. That is why I exist. And remember, you cannot become an effective teacher unless and until you have warm feelings towards your students. My dear friends, this is such a noble profession where optimism is required to an optimum level. This COVID may come, COVID may go, but we go on forever because we are teachers. Let me complete my talk by with a beautiful quotation. If you think in terms of a year, plant a seed. If in terms of 10 years, plant trees. If in terms of 100 years, teach people, my dear friend. And as a teacher, once again, let us have a faith and let us say, because all of you are familiar with songs, all of you are familiar with music. There is one very beautiful line which I often quote and which I often say, because as a teacher, you will always remain a teacher and say yourself, इस अंजुमन में आपको आना है बार बार, दीवारों दर को गौर से पहचान लीजिए. My dear teachers, my dear teacher friends, with this I end my talk, and I'll of course seek your suggestions in the form of feedback. Thank you very much. I wish you all a very good day ahead. Thank you. Stay home, stay safe.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was really, really energetic, and the shape that you quoted, they were, and most probably that presentation wala is the best one, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you have some work.